Good afternoon. It's a great honor for me to be here. I'm thrilled, actually, that I was invited to participate. I saw Colette not while she was ill, and I have many memories of her that I will share with you. I have a unique relationship with Colette. I'm the only person here who doesn't have a relationship with Colette based on some intellectual basis. Okay, we never discuss philosophy. We rarely, if ever, discussed child psychiatry. Okay, so I'm going to tell you about my personal relationship with Colette. I can figure out how to advance this slide. We can do. Oh, okay. Oh, that's okay. So this is a picture of Colette and myself in India, in other words, in New Delhi. And I'll say more about that in just a little bit. But here we are, a comrade in arms, in other words, and it'll become clear to you why we were comrade in arms in a minute. Okay? I would be giving this talk in French only, in other words, because I would love to remember Colette's smile. I could speak French a little bit, in other words, but when she heard me say something in French, she would break out laughing and she would say, "Please speak English," okay? So it's only to remember her smiling that way. So I have no conflict of interest to report, in other words, which is it. So I first met Colette, in other words, through IACAPAP, in other words, and I met Colette in IACAPAP at a time when French psychiatry, child psychiatry, was well represented. Pierre Ferrari was there, Dr. Jamet was there, Philip Jamet was there, Francois Ladon was there, and Serge Ledovici was there. Okay, so I came into IACAPAP at a time when there was a lot of discussion in French, and it was like French and others. Okay, I was part of the others. Okay, but I was younger than a lot of the other people in the room at the time, and I think Colette saw me maybe curiously as a younger person, and she couldn't quite understand me, in other words, very well. So our conversations began with, what do you think about American psychiatry, in other words, child psychiatry? What is it all about? And Colette was always curious about what it was like in the United States. And I came to realize over time that it was not just an idle curiosity, but she really wanted to know how these people could think differently than somebody from France. In other words, how do you arrive at a different worldview than someone in France? But at the same time, Colette herself was a very modern thinker. And I'll say more about that in a minute, because she was in fact the modern face of French child psychiatry. She brought recognition to French child psychiatry in a way that I don't know anybody else who did on such a global stage. In other words, so Colette, I think, took pity on me. In other words, first of all, I never came across as being very intellectual. In other words, I have to confess I'm a professor at Harvard, but I didn't get my professorship through great intellect. In other words, I'm very streetwise. In other words, and I know how to play the political game. So that's how I ended up with my professorship. It wasn't through philosophy, and I can assure you of that. But Colette was always very generous to me throughout our relationship. In every conceivable way. And while I lived in Geneva for 5 years, in other words, and during the time I was there, my wife and I bought a property in Talwar. Did I pronounce it right? Talwar, near Annecy? It's south of Geneva. In other words, it's supposed to be the most romantic place in France, if anybody didn't know that. Anyway, you may not realize that somebody from overseas, in order to buy a place, doesn't need right. Okay. And that someone, that's the same problem I had with Colette, right? That someone from overseas, if they buy a property, needs to not only have money, in other words, but they have to have a guarantor. Okay? But I didn't know that until the very last day that I was going to buy this property. And who could be my guarantor, okay? I didn't know anyone. I literally called Colette. In other words, I said, Colette, I need a guarantor. In other words, I need somebody who's going to guarantee the fact that I'm buying this house. Oh, Colette said, no problem. In other words, so what do I have to do? She never asked me how much money, in other words, how long. She never had me sign a note or anything like that. I don't think I have a friend in the U.S. who would do anything like that for me. And she never asked. She never, ever asked. Anyway. So I come back to this visit that we had to New Delhi. IACAPAP was going to have a Congress in New Delhi. And usually before a Congress, one goes to see what the place is going to be like, what the venue is going to be like. And IACAPAP appointed the two of us to go to New Delhi to do a site visit to see what was going on. You know, who the organizing committee was going to be, what were the arrangements going to be, et cetera, et cetera. Well, it turned out to be a great adventure. Okay? Most of the things that we had been told, in other words, about the venue, in other words, about the setting, about the finances, turned out not to be true. But in the process, in other words, it was Colette, in other words, who was so keen and such a good businesswoman to figure out and to pursue, as you would in a diagnostic interview, in other words, what the issues were. And then once they were there, to point it out in no uncertain terms to the other people who were there. We stayed in a hotel in New Delhi that was supposed to be the venue. And in both our rooms, we had mice. In other words, we stayed in separate rooms. Okay? But we each had white mice running around the rooms. And we told the person that this was going to be the case. And she said, no problem, no, we're going to get rid of the mice by the time you come here. Colette also was a very good businesswoman. Nobody's mentioned that. In other words, but she knew instantaneously about self-dealing. Do you know what self-dealing is? Self-dealing is when you both charge somebody and you make a profit at the same time. In other words, under the table. And she picked it up like that, like that. In other words, and we developed something which I came to appreciate more over time, that we had a shared paranoia. In other words, both Colette and I had a little bit of paranoia. We didn't quite trust everyone. In other words, that what they were saying was exactly what they meant, or that in fact it was going to be true. So anyway, it turned out that Colette was amazingly pragmatic. In other words, and I think over our relationship, what we shared was the fact that at least Colette had intellect, but she was also very streetwise. I don't know how many people really realize that. I would engage with her when she would go to South France with Simone, not about the scenery or things like this, about her Citroën. She drove a C5 or C6 or something like that, and she was always interested in the latest features. And I said, why do you do that, Simone? Why don't you get somebody, Colette, why don't you get somebody to drive you? Oh, no. And I think she loved the car. In other words, I think she liked the adventure of driving, perhaps.
Yes.
My experience with her was based on that. So she was a wonderful companion. We had a lot of fun at dinner and things like that. So this is a picture of Simone and Colette, okay? And Simone is a very special person. My wife usually came with me to IACAPAP meetings, okay? And Colette and Simone were incredibly nice. And Simone and my wife spent a lot of time together because my wife would go to a few meetings, in other words, but the rest of the time, Simone would be her companion over time. And they would go different places or just sit and, I don't know if they actually talked, in other words, but they had some communication with each other that was very enjoyable. And coming here today, my wife has very fond memories of both Colette and Simone. So do I. Colette and Simone came to Boston and visited, and they came to our home briefly, and we went out to dinner. And I took the risk of trying to make a reservation at a French restaurant near us. A French restaurant in the U.S. is not exactly like a French restaurant in Paris. So I did the best I could to find a restaurant which was decent. And I must tell you that I spent more time thinking about buying the bottle of wine that I was going to have for dinner that night. In other words, and I bought a bottle of Margaux, in other words, and it was the right beer. And Colette said, "Oh, it's good." That was the highlight of my visit with Colette. So they are both very dear to us. So I mentioned this before, but in relation to IACAPAP, in other words, IACAPAP is not a huge organization. In other words, it's been very effective, and we have wonderful memories, in other words, of the IACAPAP Congress here in Paris. In other words, it was really a fantastic time, and any of you who saw me there at that Congress will remember that I was dancing with my wife, in other words, and anybody else I could find. So it was really a spectacular event. But Colette was very worried, in other words, about the Congress and it being successful. And she spoke about the Dream Team. She was, in fact, very grateful to the team that made it possible. But she was always worried about the finances associated with it, about many other factors. And so Colette and I shared, in other words, not only in relation to the Congress, but in relation to a number of other things, a kind of conspiracy theory. In other words, an idea that there might always be something lurking behind the scenes that would undermine us, interfere with us, somehow, in other words, make our lives more difficult. And we shared that. In other words, it wasn't, I think, quite as pathologic as it would seem, but it was a general tenor of things, and particularly in relation to IACAPAP. I never heard about it in relation to other avenues. So just as Helmut mentioned, and I think Pierre Anderson mentioned, Colette was not afraid to take on tough issues. Whether it was in IACAPAP, where she took on issues related to representation of women, allied professions, the running of various events, Colette was never shy about taking on this. And it reminds me of some of the people who I've known in the U.S. Who've really been spectacular individuals and made a big difference. Leon Eisenberg comes to mind, who was also fearsome and not being afraid to take on difficult issues relating to equality, et cetera, et cetera. She was persistent. Okay? If Colette had an idea about something that it should, in fact, be done, she persisted in it. She was dogged in her commitment to preserving the French language, the French tradition, and in standing really for equality. In other words, and it's remarkable because the people, in fact, were not always so supportive of that. So I remember Colette, in other words, not for her intellect, which was awesome. In other words, as we all heard this morning, it was powerful intellect. But that she was truly grounded in reality. And so she had that rare capacity, in other words, to talk philosophy and to talk automobiles at the same time. In other words, I know very few people who were able to bridge those kinds of worlds, and it made her a very, very special person. So I just want to come back to her legacy. I think that she did a tremendous amount for French child psychiatry. In other words, in her vision on the world stage and her participation in programs throughout the world was really helpful, very helpful. And Jean-Philippe mentioned as we were sitting together that in those pictures, if you notice, Colette is most often, the only woman. In other words, surrounded by these men. And so she had a particular role to play that would be difficult for most people. She's a mentor for students and professionals worldwide. I've heard about this numerous times. at study groups that IACAPAP has sponsored, and in other conferences over time. And I think she's been the guardian of traditions that make France special. Not just the foie gras that she served at her home, in other words, but through many other ways in which she represented that. She always dressed right. She presented herself in a feminine way, and she had class, in other words, and I think that that made her very special. And for me personally, she was a friend beyond one's imagination. So I'm very happy to be here. Thank you.